Welcome to Cyber Survivor. I'm Dan Dodson, and today I'm with Phil Alexander. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on. I'm excited to talk with you today. I've really enjoyed our conversations in the past, learning from you. Look forward to sharing your experiences with the audience. Thoroughly enjoyed your Monday memo this morning for motivation. Really appreciated that. Just to set the stage, give the audience a little bit of understanding about you and your background in cybersecurity. You've done some great things. Would love for you to share your story.
Sure. 25 years in the business, all the way from the desk. I was in the DoD and the Army for a number of years, and then moved to NSA for a number of years as a cyber analyst and incident handler, that sort of thing, watch officer. And then came into the private sector for the past, say, 12 to 13 years, was in healthcare, a couple of different healthcare facilities, building cybersecurity programs from the ground up. As you guys know, in the last 10, 15 years, whatever, cybersecurity pretty new, especially in healthcare. So built those programs from the ground up and really enjoy helping that. And now today, just recently in January, I launched my own cybersecurity advisory firm where I'm just helping other CISOs and CIOs and that sort of thing. So,
absolutely, congrats on launching your own firm, Phil. I wish you lots of success in that. What we want to explore here is kind of the human side of cyber events, right? We think that oftentimes it's talked about what happens in the IT and cyber, but we want to talk about this kind of more holistically. But in order to set some context and explore a specific event that you've been through, again, no need to mention an organization or specific tactics, but set the stage for us as we think about what's a normal day for a cybersecurity team and a CISO, to give us a baseline on what a disruption might look like for that team.
You talk about pre-event?
Pre-event, yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I had a youth pastor many, many years ago when I was a youth. That's many years ago. I won't say how long ago that was, but he came and spoke to our parents, and one of the things he said really stuck with me, and I think it's apropos for this, which is rules and regulations without relationships result in rebellion. A lot of R's there, but basically what that means in it, and it really bodes well into cybersecurity as well. A lot of cybersecurity folks need the relationships with their counterparts in IT. They need the relationships with organizational people, and they need the relationship with leaders in the organization. And I think that's the biggest thing that I work with CISOs today and cybersecurity teams, is to try to convince them that training and awareness and that relationship building with organizational people pre-event is so key, because once an event happens, I've been through a couple of them now, a couple of ransomware attacks, and I've been through one that went very well, and I went through one that didn't go so well. And I can tell you that the one that went really, really well was because we had a strong, tight relationship with the senior leaders of the organization. We had a strong relationship with our vendors. We had relationships with our compadres in IT. And so I think the day-to-day operational stuff, tools and monitoring and putting in prevention stuff is great. That's all important, is all needed. But building relationships with all those people who you're going to need during that event is crucial.
Any tips and tricks you have for people as they think about building relationships? Where have you seen success, Phil, in building relationships kind of across the entire organization?
I'll just start with the top, right? One of the things that's is kind of a no-brainer for me is that whenever I go in to build a cybersecurity program, is that I put together a cybersecurity council, is what I call CSC. And with that cybersecurity council, I try to bring in senior leaders in the organization to sit on that council. And I always have this saying, we don't make decisions, we make recommendations in security. And so the leaders of the organization, operational leaders, I know this isn't popular for IT folks to give over control to operational leaders, but those operational leaders, if you do a good job, and you can, explaining to them the risk and the opportunities, if you can sell well, then they will make the right decisions. I promise you, I've been there. They do a great job making decisions on behalf of their organization. And so putting together that council, and one of my organizations, we met every 2 weeks vice presidents met every 2 weeks, and we went over those big items for security, the risk, the issues, and let them make those decisions. That relationship, having done that over a couple of years, and then all of a sudden when you have an event, they're intimately aware not only of your team and have those relationships, but they're also intimately aware of the environment and of the risk, and they will back you so much more when you have that, when you've and brought them in early. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive in and talk about, you mentioned there's two examples that come to mind. One went really well, one not so well. I'll let you pick which one you want to talk about. But again, I want to explore the human side. So help paint the picture. Where were you when you got the phone call? What happened? And what were you thinking about when you received the information that you had an unfortunate event happen that needed your attention?
Yeah, fortunately, in both situations, I had put together strong security operations teams. And so in both situations, my SOC members were aware of something going on, something, fishy, or got alerted to it. And so called me and said, hey, take a look at this. We've got something potentially happening here. In both situations, and again, those are the two big ones. Over 20, 25 years, I promise you, there's been a lot of smaller ones.
Small ones, right.
Yeah. And so over every event that I've dealt with, I can tell you that in the beginning, no one ever goes, oh my goodness, the nuclear bomb is going off. You don't see the mushroom cloud in the beginning, right? If you're good, you start seeing smoke before you see the bomb. And so I think that, even if the bad guys have been in for a while, you start getting indications and start seeing it. And so it's never this big boom, or at least not for me. My experience hasn't been the lights all went out, that kind of thing. I've caused that once before, but that's another story for all another time. But it's never the bad guys cause the whole thing to go down, right? And so when we discovered there's something potentially going on, then you start scratching the surface and you start praying, please let this be a false positive. And I think that's the feelings of humans, of people start running around going, what's going on? And, anyways, so yeah, in both situations, in both big situations, well, even the small ones, it's never been a big boom. It was just those little indications, and we just started tracing it back. And then all of a sudden, oh Lord, here, what do we have?
Yeah. And once you determined that the smoke was turning into fire, I'm sure anxiety began to increase. What happened next? I mean, did you start, corresponding with other people within the organization? How were those phone calls? How was that organized? And how did it match what you had prepared for leading up to that?
Yeah. So if you have a good incident response plan, you have those escalation, procedures in place. Hopefully, and the one that went well, we had fortunately been exercising our plan for a couple of years. And again, that's another testament to why it went well. My team got into the war room. We contacted all the relevant folks, our public affairs officer, legal counsel, right? The cybersecurity council, which had our president and other folks on the board. They come in and we give them a brief update of what we think is going on immediately, so that there's nothing surprising later on. Just here's what's happening. But then everybody gets in the room. All the IT directors get in the room, and we start talking about what we potentially see. Then those IT directors then got some of their relevant, sysadmins, network folks, whatever, to start helping to uncover if we were correct in what we're seeing. And then it just kind of flowed from there. At that moment, of course, like you said, the emotions, the tension, I'm still feeling it right now. As I rethink about those things, you start, reliving it. You start getting to that point. So yeah, it gets very emotional very quickly. Once it's determined, yeah, we have a problem. We've got the bad guys either hitting us, trying to get in, or they have gotten in, and we've got a major problem. I cannot stress, people who are watching or listening to this, who've been through it, obviously will know the stress level is off the charts. It's just not even close. I think the thing that really shocks me in both events is how many people at every level I mean, from vice president down to the lowest level person on the help desk, felt like they were going to lose their job. That was amazing to me that during an event, people were so scared about that. And that's a concern because even in a good organization, people shouldn't feel that way. And if you feel that way, then you're not going to do as good a job during an event. And so that was something that I felt like we, in every situation, we need to do a better job of ensuring people understand that you're not going to lose your job if this thing goes south, you know?
Yeah, that just adds to the anxiety in the middle of an event for sure.
Yeah.
Looking at that time period through a different lens, how were the interactions with the clinical staff, and what were some of the feelings that they had as care began to be, disrupted in some form or fashion?
Yeah, I would say that the one that went well was we had actually caught it was actually a Russian terrorist organization that were trying to get in. They had hit us. We had a couple of, I would say, minor disruptions, denial of service stuff on a couple of our sites, nothing major and again, we had a good relationship with the FBI field office, and we were working with them on some mitigation efforts to try to stop them. We had a great SOC. And when we reached out to our clinical counterparts and started saying, here are some things that we need to do to ensure that they don't get in. And if they do start destroying stuff or ransomware, here's what we need to do. For instance, one of the things that we decided to do as an organization was to unplug half of all of our equipment in case we lost anything. Then we'd at least, when we start coming back up, we'd have half of everything. Once this thing's over, we'd at least could still do operations. So we figured that was going to be the thing. As we fight these guys, let us take down half of what we got. Well, we had clinical folks, we had doctors who had clinics that they were running around, oh, we'll just close the clinic. We're just going to shut down. We're not going to take the chance. That was good and bad, right? I'm glad they were taking it serious, but on the other side, we're like, no, don't stop, don't stop clinic. And so the operational leaders had to really work with their clinical staff not to go too far one way or the other, right? To say, this is no big deal. I want to keep all of my equipment up. Or go the other way where we're just going to shut down until this is over with, because we don't know how long it's going to last. We can't have them do that. So I think we had a really good, in that case, again, because of our relationship, because of the awareness in that organization, we had a lot of clinical staff who wanted to just jump in and do the right thing. But, we had to maintain that reality.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Phil, because you think about, in the fight, so to speak, you don't know exactly what is going to transpire. And so protecting half of it so that you could continue to provide care, which is, I think, something that's often lost in, these types of discussions, because we talk about the IT and the cyber side of it so much. But the reality is we serve organizations that are in communities to deliver care. That's why they exist, right? And so how do we, navigate these situations while minimizing the disruption to care? And it's,
well, let me just pick back on that too. I'll say that in another situation, when we did get taken down, bringing things back online, the difficult part is, healthcare organizations, large ones, and I've worked for large ones. You have, obviously you want to go straight to the clinical side where patient care, direct patient care, that's the ones you want to bring up first. And again, this is not we got the ransomware key and let's just plug it in and everything magically just comes back on, right? This takes time. And so you have the support side of the house that's sitting around waiting for their turn to come back online. And so the frustration gets very, gets ramped up even afterwards because everybody wants to go. And so, yeah, it gets, you have it in the beginning where people understand, but then after it's over, they want it to be over, and that's just the business,
That's right. The tail on these types of events is pretty long, right?
It is
disruptive. Yeah. Absolutely. Thinking about the example that you gave where there's this spectrum of response clinically where folks wanted to shut clinics or were adjusting to the new reality of half the equipment available. If we walk that a little bit farther, what was the impact to the patients? I mean, were we canceling appointments? Were we delaying care? what was your experience as to the real disruption of these events in this community
Oh yeah.
as it relates to the patients?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that and it's hard to quantify that, isn't it? I mean, when you start canceling things, I remember one event. This was completely separate from ransomware attack, but one event where it wasn't a malicious actor. It was our negligence, but our exchange servers crashed. We lost everything. We had no backups. We lost everything, and prior to that event, this was years ago, but prior to that event, most people say, well, that's just email. If you lose email, no big deal. You just pick up the phone call. Well, guess what? All the clinics use their calendars. Nobody had calendars. All the calendars were gone. All of their OneDrives were gone. I mean, it wasn't like recoverable. It's gone. All the documentation that we had them go to, it was an insane nightmare. So in IT, we had put that in a tier 2 category, not a tier 1. So if you think about it, and so again, lesson learned, but the patient care when you don't have the data, and that's just one. And then of course in the ransomware attack, when they lock down your servers and you can't do it. So give you a great example. One of our biggest problems and concerns was around cancer care. Cancer is one of those things where if you've ever had anybody go through it, it's not a one-time thing. You go in, you get a treatment, and you're done. It's a series, and it's not like, oh, well, I don't remember. We don't have the record, so we don't know if you're on series number 7 or if you're on 10. We'll just start over. You don't just start over. It's not that easy. And so that was, that's the anxiety, not just for the clinicians, but for the patients and families of sitting there. I had an appointment this Thursday, but I can't go because it may be months before I get back. Then I'm being told that, hey, we may or may not have your records, your data. The stress of that is just unreal, just unreal from that. So, I always say in new employee orientation, I used to tell folks that we do a good job a lot of times in healthcare where we'll heal people, send them home, and they're happy. For 2 weeks later for them to come back, 2 or 3 weeks later they're coming back, and they're mentally and emotionally distraught because either their finances were breached because of us, or their patient records, or whatever. Our job is to take care of the patient holistically, all the way through, and we cause them more stress when we have these events that we don't do a good job on the front end.
Yeah, and I hear now a lot as well that a lot of these clinicians, they don't know how to deliver care without the technology, right? I mean, it's so interwoven. And look, we hear all the time. We go down for normal maintenance, if you will, and we go to paper for a period of time. But when you're talking about days or weeks or months without access to I'll say normal technology that they have, it just cripples their ability to deliver care.
It really does. And all of our systems now are so tied and integrated to where, we would like to say, oh, you should be able to do it on paper, but we've spoiled them, I should say, or maybe not spoiled them. We've encouraged them. We've forced them to look at this. Don't do this without this. And so the medications, the AI or the whatever, the LLM or whatever, will say, don't give this medication. It'll tell the doctors a lot of times, don't do this because here's some stuff. Oh, shoot, I almost didn't see that, because there's so much documentation coming from different places that EMR is trying to, bring it all together. And I'll say this. We did my BCDR manager was doing a business impact analysis with a couple of departments one time, and she was going through the different systems and going, they had to do all the form and everything, and she's like, I need to know if this is a big deal for you, if it goes down, and how long and how much disruption can you afford and all that stuff. And the department directors were going through this, and this one department goes, I don't care about this system here, this system X I don't really care about. What they didn't know is that system has fed their system. So if that system went down, their system was irrelevant. So, it's one of those things where we think if this system's up, this is all I care about in cardiology or whatever. But what you don't realize is that system is being fed by another system, who's being fed by another system or whatever. And so it gets complicated really fast, understanding the dependencies.
That's a fascinating point, Phil. And I think a lot of people that aren't in this every day don't necessarily realize that these organizations are running hundreds of systems. It's not a single, And by system, we mean application for the novice, right? So, the interconnectivity and the data flow is so important that it doesn't get disrupted. And when it does, it can certainly be impactful. I want to go back for a moment and talk about something you said, which is, in both instances, the team that is there to recover, the IT and cyber teams, are worried about their jobs. What was their day like while they were living through these events, Phil? I mean, is this like a 20 hours, go home and sleep and come back? Like, explain some of what that trauma looked like for those folks.
Yeah, and I can tell you that every organization I've worked at the agency, and whereas the government did throw money at, we had plenty of money and we had a lot of folks. You never have no one. I've never been to an organization where you've got more than enough people, just sitting around twiddling their thumbs. And it's even more so the problem in healthcare where you have one deep in some things. And so when you have a cyber event and you got one or two people in certain areas that are one deep in that knowledge base, where there's an application, legacy or new, hardware, whatever, networking, whatever it may be, then what do you have? You can't run. For instance, one of the things we did was we contacted a couple of hospitals that had been in this situation before, and they said, "Oh, well, create different teams so that you have operations so people can, because this could go on for 6 months or a year, and so make sure you have 3 or 4 teams, and that way they're, one sysadmin, one network, one security, blah blah blah, whatever, and you have these little pods. That's great if you can do that, but what if you can't?" And so a lot of times you can't do that. And so those people are working 12, 20, like you said, 20 hours, 24 hours. I mean, just around the clock, especially in the beginning for weeks and weeks. And I will tell you that we made that mistake in one of the situations where we did not take care of the people and we burned them out so much in the beginning. Because the misunderstanding, if you've never been through it, if an organization never been through it, the idea is it doesn't matter. We're all going to work our butts off as hard as we can, as long as we can, to get everything back up. Yeah, that's great. And you could probably do it in record time, but then you're going to lose some really good people when it's over because you burn them out and they're, what I'm saying? So, in my opinion, the one that did well is when we took our time and we work long hours, but you take your time and you don't burn your people out. You're right. Because when you're working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, no kidding, 7 days a week, nobody's optimal. You're not that optimal. You're just not going to do that great a job. Number one. Number two is, again, going back to when it's over, you're just exhausted. And it's not like when it's over, everybody's going to take off a month and, go to Hawaii or something, and have a big team hula, right? It's you're back to business, back to regular operations. And so your team is just wore out, just exhausted. And during that type of event, I'll tell you, every single event I've ever been involved in like that amount of stress, it will show you who a person is. Yeah. It shows you the true nature of every single person on your team, every single person that's involved, those clinicians, everything. If they were an incredibly nice doctor and nurse to you before, they may not be during this event. You're going to find out who they are. And there were some that were extremely nice to the event. Some were not. People that you work with, in IT, extremely nice beforehand, not so nice during the event. It brings out people's true self, I think, that amount of stress. And so I think it's best to try to keep those people inside, don't let them come out. And how you do that is try to, as leaders, I think it's important to manage the stress of your people. But anyways.
Yeah, no, that's difficult. I mean, you chain some of this together. And so you have an event start, you have a team working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're going home. All their friends know that they work at the hospital in IT or in cyber. They're getting blamed by the community and they think they're going to lose their job. Right. And there's no end in sight. I mean, that is a difficult situation.
There is never, and let me tell you, there is never a single thing you can put your finger on and say, if we done this one thing, this wouldn't happen. The sysadmins think that they're, because when this happens and you have your incident response retainer team from, let's say, the insurance company or the FBI comes in or whoever comes in to help you, well, guess what? They're finding not only the thing that happened, but they're uncovering all these other holes that, ooh, look at this, look at this, look at this. So you got sysadmins, you got network team, you've got, security teams, you got everybody being exposed, at least they feel that way, being exposed. And everybody's like, oh, crap, I'm going to get fired. And so when you have that, I think the problem too is if you're not careful, if you have a culture like that, what ends up happening is then those people are going to try to hide that stuff, right? Right. In the midst of the event, nobody's going to want to be honest. And therefore, if you're not honest about what's going on, you can't solve it for the future. You can't stop it from happening again, And so that stress really, as a leader, the most important thing, I think, leadership during those events is people. Is managing people, not managing the event, managing people's expectations, managing people's stress levels. That's the most important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. Having lived through these, Phil, what are 2 or 3 recommendations that you have for organizations to help manage that stress? Because, to your point, that stress can lead to, frankly, longer delays and longer disruption to patient care, right? From whether you're hiding the ball or you're not thinking straight because you're working so much. What recommendations do you have, having lived through some of these events?
Yeah. And you say it could be longer, but the thing that my team always worried about is that it could be a repeat, right? 3 months later, they come back and hit you again, because the bad guys, if they've been in, you have to assume they know all the holes. They may not have told you, I know your other holes over here. And so they get you the first time, you don't fix them, they come back and they hit you in a different way. So it's constant. I would say, again, going back to my original thing, relationship. And that is, both internally and externally. I love the Westerns, Old West stuff. And Doc Holliday, Tombstone, you think about Wyatt Earp had Doc Holliday as his backup, right? I think about who do I compare him to? When we had our major event that went well, we called in some of our key vendors who we had relationships with. They brought in free resources. Now, I say air quotes on free. They didn't charge us anything. They were there to help us. But at the same time, we knew that later on, right, that's going to bode well for them, right? They're going to get that goodwill. But nonetheless, they brought in resources to help us. We relied on the FBI. We had relationships with them. So those external resources, other hospitals who'd been through it we could pick up the phone and call them. We didn't cold call. We had relationships. I could name some big hospitals that my team had relationships with that we picked up the phone and said, here's where we're at. Here's what's going on. What else could we be doing? And those relationships made a huge difference. So I think relationships, people who sit inside their little castle and they never go to conferences, they never get out of their city, they never build relationships with their hospital, go to their other organizations, whether it's within your industry or other industries, build those relationships. And I think that's bodes well. Then with the inside the organization, those leaderships, transparency is everything. I create a quarterly cybersecurity report every quarter, and I publish it to the leadership. And it is a bloodbath. It's always read, all the bad stuff. I don't care. I'm not trying, if CISOs or CIOs are trying to hide stuff from, leaders or whatever, then I hear this all the time from leaders who say, well, we can't get the funding we need. We can't get the staff we need. That's because you're lying. Because you ain't telling them, if you tell them these are all the problems we have, they're like, how do we fix it? Well, glad you asked, here's what I need. And here's the other thing. Then when something that bad happens, guess what happens? When the outside agency comes in and says, oh, here's the issues. If these things would have been fixed, y'all wouldn't have had this problem. Oh, amazing. That's in my report, isn't it? And so it's kind of also a get out of jail free card. But again, I'm not doing it as a CYA, even though it works that way. I'm doing it as, hey, it's important that they know, leaders, the board, the senior leaders of the organization need to know what the risks are. And so to me, those are the 2 most important things you can do, is get senior leaders on board, however you can do that, and be transparent with them. And then your external support, having support or having relationships with your vendors, it's not a transactional thing. There should be some of your key vendors that you have relationships with besides just a transactional relationship.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I love your idea about sharing that report, especially with the clinical staff, because when we think about, budgets at these organizations, every dollar we move to cyber is a dollar away from the bedside, right?
Correct.
So helping people understand, the risks that we're taking on as an organization if we're not continuing to invest in cybersecurity, I think is really important. So zooming out a little bit, Phil, from these examples that you gave, and I appreciate you sharing your insights. How do you think the industry is doing? What are some of the areas you think the industry's made progress in, and where do you think we still have a lot of work to do at the industry level?
Yeah, I think that one of the things, and this came out of every single event that I've been a part of, whether it was small, whether it was the two large ones, every single event that I've been a part of, it was the same thing. And I still see people struggle with it all the time. And it's one of my speeches that I give, and it's on my website. First thing you'll see on my website, cybersecurity is simple, right? Or simplified. We make this too hard. Cybersecurity is simple. I didn't say it's easy, right? It's simple. And that may sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but it is the difficult part is the human side, right? We've been talking about that, is getting people on board and keeping transparency and keeping people with feelings from I'm going to get fired or they're going to think I'm bad or whatever it is, the imposter syndrome, whatever people deal with. That's the hard part. But cybersecurity stuff is so simple. Poneman did a study a couple of years ago that 90% of all successful cyber attacks was due to a patch had been available over a year prior. So this was 90%. A patch had been available a year prior. This is not rocket science. Some of the ones that I've been a part of, simple things like MFA, segregation, segmentation. The problem is today in the industry, all we care about is the next shiny object. And no offense, but AI, this, that, robots, this, all of these things are great and wonderful. And yet we step over the basics to get to the fancy stuff. If we only had, and I won't name big names, but big name tool X, right? This wouldn't happen. Yeah, it would, because that's not what the problem was. It was basics, So it's the basic hygiene we continue to struggle with every single day.
Yeah, it's funny, Phil. You made me think of a story. I'll never forget this. I was sitting with a CFO actually, and a CISO at an organization when WannaCry started the outbreak. And we were talking about a DLP strategy for this organization. And I had been briefed by my team in the meeting, and we were there to talk about DLP, which, as you know, is a powerful control, but it certainly shouldn't be the first thing that you're trying to tackle if you're not mature. And so I started, briefing with my team, and I uncovered that they weren't even patching, which is what made me think of this story. And so I'm sitting there, and their strategy was, we're opening a new building in a month, and we're just not going to patch at all until we enter the new building. And I remember sitting there, and I told the executive team, I said, I cannot in good conscience talk to you about a DLP capability right now, because you're not even doing the fundamentals. I call them the fundamentals, basics, blocking and tackling, the unsexy stuff you got to do to protect the organization. Why do you think that as an industry, this is the biggest area that we need to focus on? We avoid time and time again, and I'm to your point, it's not easy, right? It's not easy to do that. It's difficult to bring down time to create opportunity to patch at the application level, Java, et cetera, all the things that us practitioners know about. Why do you think we don't do that as an industry?
I think, to me, because I was DOD for so many years, and then I went to NSA. We were so far ahead of industry because nobody really knew anything about it. And so when I came into industry, I'm like, why is everybody making this so hard? I think that's the key, is that it's the unknown. People don't know. So give you an example, just like you just got your son with one of your clients. I have a VAR, a reseller, who called me and he said, I need you to talk to some of my clients, because what you said to me is exactly what I want you to say to them. Stop buying stuff. Mm-hmm. He said, I'm making money. It's great. They're buying stuff from me, but he goes, they don't have anybody to manage it. And he goes, it's so ridiculous. And here's the thing that I'll say too, Dan, is that, I heard this even as a CISO. Got to have a SIM, got to have a SIM, got to have a SIM, got to have a SIM. No, you don't. If you don't have anybody run the SIM, it doesn't make no sense to have a SIM. Oh, great. I get to check the block for my compliance every year for HIPAA or whatever your compliance is, but I'm not compliance, I'm security. And so, when I meet with CISOs and CIOs and they're building a program, they're struggling to get it going. First thing I do is I go in and go, you've got the wrong stuff. You bought the stuff that need people. You need people. I'd rather have a couple of good, strong people and some basic tools that's going to solve it. And so I think that's the thing is we have compliance in there, whether it's, HIPAA or whatever the industry compliance is. If somebody's doing NIST or whatever, that's forcing it, PCI, all of that. And so they're trying to check the block on some of those things. And a lot of times I'm finding that leaders are promoted into a position. They don't have real, CISO experience. And so they're going with what's the latest and greatest on the checklist, is without starting from the basics. And so I think it's lack of knowledge and lack of experience on those in leadership and true CISO experience. And then two, I think it's the compliance pushing it. I'm all about compliance. I don't think a lot of organizations do the right thing if we didn't have compliance, but there needs to be some common sense applied to it. Somebody has to push back. So I think those are the two things I think is the biggest problems that why we continue to struggle.
Yeah, I think that's right. And to build on that, there are some very sophisticated cybersecurity technologies out there that you can build a defense in depth strategy that will lower the risks. But that risk reduction really comes in how you operationalize that technology with people and process, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. One of the things that, fortunately, it's not the case today, but just 2 years ago, most people didn't know that Microsoft did not back up your stuff. You had to pay a third party to do that. And I used to yell and scream at companies or, organizations, CISOs, friends of mine, and say, you need to back up your 365. And they go, oh, no, we have the platinum plan. We have all the stuff. So, Microsoft's got that. It's in the cloud, It doesn't matter. Go look at. And so when I would show them that it said, we do not back up your OneDrive, we do not back up your Exchange, whatever, here's a list of companies we recommend. They were like, what? And then they would contact their Microsoft rep. It's only till I think last year, year before that Microsoft started getting into that business. And so it's just like we think these weird stuff where, oh, it's in the cloud, it's secure. Oh, it's this or it's that. I don't know where these things come from. And to me, it's a good security person is someone who doesn't believe anything. We're skeptical about everything. And we should grow all of our security people from, where's it at? What's the show me state? Wisconsin, whatever it's at. I don't know. I'm going to butcher that, Michigan or wherever it's at. But they should all come from the show me state, right? Because too many of them are believing, what everybody's telling them. I'm not going to believe that. Show it to me. Show it to me in the contract.
Yeah, agreed. So, Phil, my last thing would be thinking about this in conclusion from a patient's perspective. How concerned should patients be from your perspective as it relates to disruption of care? I think that we've all had our personal information exposed through one of the various number of consumer-based breaches, right? And that stinks, and nobody certainly wants that. But I think there's a level of anxiety that comes from someone that's seeking care in these communities. How resilient do you think we are as a healthcare industry, and how concerned would you be as a patient?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is like in the old days, military days, when you would go from base to base, you PCS to the next duty station, you literally hand carried a file with all your medical records. You took it with you to your next base. That's obviously not the case today. We don't do paper. And so when you think about that, there's not a central database that's holding a patient record. So if that hospital or that organization goes kapooey, your stuff is gone. I don't think people really understand that, as well as we should. I think as an industry, as a healthcare industry, I think that's our biggest, issue. I think we're moving to a single thing. Epic obviously is eating everybody's lunch, and so that single EMR is definitely coming. I do believe that's coming. I think there's some inherent risk with that as well, but that's another topic for another day. But I think that is there can be some good in that as well, because everything is housed, if they house it again at Epic. But I think that's the biggest thing that I would be worried about. is that all of your stuff is gone. If I'm someone who has a lot of health issues and very specific health issues that I need that information to be able to pass along, I'm probably somebody that whenever I go to my doctor's appointment, they say, would you like a copy? I'm like, yes, I would. That's just medication list, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, they've got apps now, but you can't just trust the app's going to be there. Again, can you get a copy of that? And that's what I would do. Fortunately for me, I'm very healthy and I don't have a lot of those needs. But if I'm a patient that has those needs, I'm probably getting a copy of those in today's world. It's just the world we live.
Yeah, no, that's a great recommendation. Makes a ton of sense. Any closing comments before we wrap up? Phil, really appreciate your insights today.
Yeah, I would say that whether it is a CEO who's watching it, whether it is a vendor who's consulting with the client, and I don't care if it's healthcare, what industry it's in, it's a CISO, CIO level, IT. This is my message I preach, and keep it simple. Do the simple things. Do the simple things. Stop doing the sexy stuff, like you said. Stop chasing the latest and greatest without doing the basics. Shore up the basics first. You're going to hit 90% of the preventions just doing the basics, and those are less expensive, by the way, than doing the sexy.
I agree with you completely. Focus on the fundamentals. Phil, thank you so much for joining Cyber Survivor. We appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan.